In a previous video, I showed you how to create a standalone Azure SQL database. It only takes a few clicks and you have a fully functioning database ready for use. When you create your database, you have to decide the power level that it needs, and then you must ensure that there's enough power to work optimally as it grows, but isn't overspec'd so as to cost you more than necessary. That's fairly easy when you only have a few databases, but once you have a large number, you'll soon realize trying to keep them running optimally, ensuring that the power level is correct, is quite difficult to manage. Although you can create alerts and automation jobs to manage your power level, changing from one level to another can cause a short outage on your database. And if you have a database with an occasional peak, you could be paying for more power that you rarely need. What would be much better is a way of sharing the unused power from one database with another database that needed it for a short while. In this way, we could smooth out the peaks in demand and reduce the overall power needed by all the databases. And this is what SQL Elastic Pools can give us. And in this demo, I will show you how to create a SQL Elastic Pool, assign databases to it, and show you some of the advantages and disadvantages of using Elastic Pools. Before we move on to Elastic Pools, let's remind ourselves of the way Azure performance levels work. There are 3 performance levels for Azure SQL Database: Basic, Standard, and Premium. And each service tier has different power levels, which are measured in database transaction units, or DTUs. Now, a DTU represents the power of the database engine as a mix of CPU, memory, and read and write rates. Unlike your traditional SQL Server, you cannot choose the number of CPUs, memory, or disk configuration. You can only choose the number of DTUs you need. So in our example on the screen, a basic database has 5 DTUs. If you went for a standard S0 with 10 DTUs, you can expect that database to have twice as much power in it. So for each database, you decide how much power that it will require and you set it accordingly. The performance level you choose must be high enough to cope with the maximum demand placed on that database. And as I've already mentioned, if you only have occasional peaks, you can end up paying for more DTUs than you really need. So let's take a look at an example. Here is a report with 3 Azure SQL databases. As you can see, each one peaks every 20 minutes at just under 1 DTU. But between that peak, activity is pretty close to 0. With a standalone Azure database, we will need to size each database to cope with that maximum peak, but we would still have to pay for that performance level between those peaks when it's not needed. If we're to merge these performance graphs, we can see that in this case, the combined total DTUs has not increased. In this case, if we could share the power, then all 3 DTUs could run in just 1 DTU, rather than each database having to use 1 DTU each, costing a total of 3 DTUs. By pooling the power available, we can use less DTUs overall to achieve the same performance, and this is what an Elastic Pool gives us. With an Azure Elastic Pool, we can place those databases into a shared pool of DTUs, and now we will make much better use of the power available to us, and thus saving money. Now, before you all write in and say 1 DTU isn't worth sharing, obviously think of these as production systems that could be running at 100 DTUs, and therefore you can start seeing the savings. So let's go over to the Azure portal and have a look at how we can create an Elastic Pool. Here I am in the Azure portal. I've already logged in and I have a dashboard here showing my 3 Azure SQL databases called Elastic DB1, Elastic DB2 and Elastic DB3. Very original names, I'm sure you'll agree. I have some automation jobs running which are producing some activity on these 3 databases, And as you can see, the activity is happening at different times on each database. So these are ideal candidates to put into an Elastic Pool because the peaks are happening at different times, so they could share the same number of DTUs between them without causing any performance issues. Let me click on SQL Servers, and you'll see that I have one Azure SQL Server called Clooney Elastic Server. If I click on that, you'll see I have a number of databases running on this Azure SQL Server, but you can see the three that we're interested in: Elastic DB1, DB2, and DB3. Now, to create an Elastic Pool, we can do it from the menu on the left-hand side, or we can click New Pool up the top. So if I click on that, we'll open up the Elastic Database Pool screen. I need to give the pool a name, so I'm going to call it Elastic Band, which it's happy with. I then can click on the pricing tier. As with all things Azure, we have three levels of pricing: Basic, Standard, and Premium. And the price given down here is slightly misleading because it's suggesting that it's only going to cost us £1.12. If we read the small print, we can see it says per EDTU per month. And if we look up here, we can see that the minimum number of EDTUs is actually 50. So the price is going to be 50 times £1.12, which is going to come close to £55. So it's a lot more than you expect. Standard, again, it's a minimum of 50 at £1.68 per EDTU per month, and Premium, the minimum is 125 EDTUs at £4 a month. So when you start thinking about using Elastic Pools, you need to make sure that you actually have enough databases going in it to make it worthwhile. The basic standalone database costs about £4 a month. This is costing £55 a month. You can do the maths. You can see that you're going to need 12, 14 databases before it becomes worthwhile. For this example, I'm going to select Basic and select there, and that will fill in the box for us, and will come back and tell us £55.92 for the month. We can now configure our pool. So let's click on Configure, and here we can decide on the minimum number of DTUs we want to assign to our pool. So currently it's 50. We can push this up, and you'll see the amount of disk space it's giving us is also going up at the same time. And we can go right up to our maximum of 1600 EDTUs, which is going to cost us nearly £1,800 per month, which is quite a lot of money. So I'm going to take it back down to the minimum, which will give us a maximum of 50 EDTUs and a maximum of 100 databases within this pool. Over on this side of the screen, we can choose the maximum number of EDTUs to assign to a particular database. With Basic, we only have the choice of 5. And we can also choose the minimum number of EDTUs we want to assign to a database. So by default, any new database will have no EDTUs assigned to it. It will only gain EDTUs as it needs them, and when it's not doing anything, it will drop down to 0. That may not be a good solution for you, because if you had a whole load of databases running on here and they all grabbed all 50 EDTUs, then your database, which has been sitting there doing nothing with 0, wouldn't have any EDTUs to grab. So you may want to set the minimum so that everything has 5. This is Basic, so there's a limited option for these two. When we look at a standard one later on, you'll see there are more options to select the maximum and the minimum. But I'm going to leave these at 5 and 0. We now need to add the databases to our Elastic Pool. So if we click on Add Databases, we can now choose the databases we want to add. So there's Elastic DB3, DB2, DB1. Click Select. It's filled it all in for us. we can now select for our configuration, which will bring us back to the screen. And it's now showing us still £55.92, 3 databases, and we can now click OK. And that will now start initializing and building the Elastic Pool and moving those databases into that Elastic Pool for us. Now I'm going to pause this video and come back in a few hours' time, which will give time for those Elastic databases to get established and for the automation jobs to run, so we can see the performance metrics for those Elastic databases. Welcome back to the video. Now I did originally say I would be back after a couple of hours, but I've been fighting with the Windows Fall Creator update. So rather than being a couple of hours after the event, it's nearly a week. But there we are, that's the joy of Windows for you. So the Elastic Pool has been created. It only took a few minutes to create and to move the databases in there, and we can see it listed at the bottom of the screen. So if we click on Elastic Band, here is the Elastic Pool screen, standard set of options down the left hand side and menu items across the top. You can see here server is Clooney Elastic Server. It's the basic pricing tier with 50 DTUs and 3 databases, each of which can have between 0 and 5 DTUs. And a couple of useful graphs, so we can see that the resource utilization, we can see the jobs that are running, producing around about 10 or 11% of our DTUs each time they run. And further down, a nice screen showing us the 3 databases and how much of their DTU percentage they're using. So they are generally hitting around 100% of the allocation to them. In the options, we have alert rules, as you would find in your SQL database, your SQL Server, and most other Azure objects. I've created an alert already called Elastic Overload. If we click on that one, so in this case I've set up the DTU percentage being used. If it's greater than 70% for more than 10 minutes, then email me, because it could be a case that we may be hitting the maximum performance for this Elastic Pool. We might need to start looking at upgrading to the next one. There are quite a number of metrics as well as the percentage. You can look at the limit, the number used, the data I/O percentages, the storage as well, to make sure you're not hitting the maximum storage available. So there's various metrics and alerts that you can set up, and that's the one that I have done in this case. Now I have set up a dashboard called Elastic Pool, where we can see various graphs of how our Elastic Pool is running. So this one again is the percentage of our Elastic Pool that we are using. So we are using around about 10 or 11% of our Elastic Pool. This one actually shows the actual number, so we're using just over 5 eDTUs, and this one is showing the percentage of DTUs that each database is running. To complete the list, I've got the 3 databases down here showing their usage each time they run, so we can see what is happening on each individual database. Now you may look at this and go, well, I'm using 5 DTUs out of 50. I've got 45 DTUs to play with. What can we fit into there? Now I have down here a database, AdventureWorks 2016, which is actually a standard 1 database and is using 20 DTUs when it's running. You may look at that and go, well, that's fantastic, because I can fit that in here and make better use of my Elastic Pool. I can fit those 20 DTUs in there easily. But you can't. This is a basic Elastic Pool, and any database in that basic Elastic Pool can only have a maximum of 5 DTUs assigned to it. So if I was to place this AdventureWorks database, which is using 20 DTUs, it's a standard 1, into my basic Elastic Pool, it would automatically be downgraded to a basic database and only be able to use 5 DTUs. So the performance of that would drop off enormously. The basic pool can only contain basic databases. You need to have at least 20 basic databases to be able to put into that Elastic pool to make it worth having one. If you've got lots of standard or premium databases, you cannot put them into a basic Elastic pool. Now you're going to say, well, let's just up this basic pool to a standard pool. So let's go and click on Elastic Pools, select Elastic Band, click on Configure Pool, and you'll find there is no option to upgrade an Elastic pool. You cannot convert it from a basic Elastic pool to a standard Elastic pool. The option is not there. If we look at our per database settings, we can only set it to a maximum of 5. We cannot change that. If we want our databases to be in a standard Elastic pool, we will need to create a new Elastic pool and then move the databases to it. So if I come back to Elastic Pools, I can add a new Elastic pool. So we can call this Elastic S. We'll use our existing resource group. I'll carry on using the current Elastic server, and this time we're going to use a standard pool. If I come and click on Configure Pool, we can now choose how many DTUs we want our pool to have. So we can go down to still have 50 DTUs, which will cost me £83 a month. Or if I wanted to, I could go all the way up and have 3,000 DTUs, which is going to cost me £5,000 a month. But here you can now see that this list is changing. We can now choose what is the maximum number of DTUs that we want individual databases to have. So now, rather than on basic, where we were stuck at only being allowed to give it 5, we could now say that each database could have a maximum of 200 DTUs, and we can now assign the minimum number of DTUs. So each database will always have 10 DTUs, regardless of how much it's being used. Let me put this back down to 50, and you'll see that the maximum number has dropped again. So now we can assign the maximum number of DTUs to be 50, so one database could grab the whole lot. Or we could say the minimum number of DTUs to assign to a database is 50, which means you could only ever have one database in the pool, which I don't quite see the point of. But we could say we always want to make sure that our database has at least some power available to it, so it's not starved by all the other databases that are running on there. So we could say, give me a minimum of 10 and a maximum of 50. And this is going to cost me £83.75. So let's add our databases. We can now move our Elastic databases and our standard S1 into my Elastic pool. So let's select those and click Select. And now we can click on Create. I've refreshed the list. It's only taken a couple of minutes for the Elastic S pool to be created. We can see it's a standard with 50 eDTUs assigned to it. So it looks very similar to the basic, which has got 50 eDTUs. But the difference is our standard can hand out more eDTUs per database. So if we click on Standard S, we'll see the information that we've seen before. We can see that our 4 databases have been assigned to this Elastic pool. There's no data in the graph because it's immediately after it's been created, so nothing's actually got in there yet. If we left it a few hours, then they would start to fill up as we've seen before. If we click on our 4 databases, just to prove that they have gone in, we can see here Elastic DB1, DB3 and DB2 and AdventureWorks. Now what I'm going to do again is leave this for a couple of hours and we'll see what happens to the performance of our Elastic databases. Do they now go and use more than 5 DTUs. Welcome back to the video. It's about an hour since I created our standard Elastic Pool, and we now have some data in our monitoring graphs. I've created a new dashboard for the Elastic Standard Pool. I'm going to flip over to that so we can have a look and see what's going on. Here is the dashboard for my Elastic Pool. I have updated it to look at the new Elastic Pool, and you can see that the Elastic Database 1, 2 and 3 are continuing to use roughly the same amount of DTUs that they were using before, but my AdventureWorks 2016 database is now using all 100% of the DTUs available to it when it runs. So before it was just a standalone S1 database with only 20 DTUs available to it. Inside this pool, it now has 50 DTUs and it is using all of those. So it looks like my database was actually limited when it was running as a standard. By running it within the pool, it now has 50 DTUs for that peak when it's needed, but we can use those other DTUs for other databases. We can add more databases in here and we can use them to use those 50 DTUs. And in that way, we can save money and make better use of the power that is available to us. Elastic pools can make things cheaper for us, but you need to make sure that you have the right Elastic pool for the type of databases that you are using, and that you have enough databases to actually make the pool viable. But overall, I think this is a major step forward in saving money and making better use of the power available to you from Azure. In my next video, we will have a look at Elastic Database jobs, which allow you to run SQL jobs against all of the databases in the Elastic Pool at the same time. I hope this video has been useful to you. You can view more of my videos on Azure and SQL databases on my YouTube channel. There is also a free ebook available on Microsoft Azure that you can download from gethanellis.com. So please leave a comment if you enjoyed this video, or even if you didn't, and I'll look forward to hearing from you. Thank you very much for listening.